All right, everybody, welcome back. Nick and I are super excited. Episode 16, our guest was Andrew Reiner. Nick, tell us a little bit about our guest.
Anger Reiner is an associate professor at Towson University where he teaches English. And he recently just came out with a new book called Better Boys, Better Men. It's awesome book, great read, a lot of insights. Brennan, can you tell them a little bit about what we discussed in this conversation?
What I really like is that we discuss something a little bit different in this perspective. I think culturally we talk about masculinity in a lot of different ways, but what we never do is look at it from like a root cause of why perhaps are we not raising the men that need to be who they are in society. And I think we try and answer that question throughout this conversation. Yeah, it goes pretty deep. Highly recommend this. Talks a lot about masculinity and how it's showing up in our world today, and in a lot of boys and different men. So yeah, we hope you enjoy the conversation. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Thank you, Andrew, so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And Brennan and I have been looking forward to this conversation because I think it's a topic that so important, and silence is so present around this topic. So I really appreciate your work and the time you're taking with us. But we like to get started just by hearing a little bit about your background, however much you want to share, about maybe how you got into this work, and what drew you to this work as well.
Just perpetuating that idea of the silence around the topic. So
yeah.
Anyway, ha 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 ha. So this is a topic that really began actually when I became a young adult. It really became a crusade for me. So the short story, I'll try not to make this too long. The short story of it is, so when I was about 7 years old, I got into this really brutal fist fight with this kid in the neighborhood. And in my neighborhood, anytime there were little scraps like that, I mean, it was literally a few minutes, a few punches were thrown, you went back to playing together and all was well. And this was like, this was one of those, made for TV movie fights where it was just, completely breaks with the script. The kid is just, what we felt, if we were fighting for what felt like hours, of course it wasn't, but it was the only time I can ever remember where the entire neighborhood of kids basically came running and created this giant circle and we're just kind of watching. And one of the things that happens a lot of times, when you're dealing with traumatic situations, is time slows down and you become aware of these details that ordinarily you probably wouldn't have picked up on. And the detail that I always remember is that there's two things. One is that pretty much every kid in the neighborhood was there. And the second thing I remember is that their mouths were just kind of agape because we had never had this kind of brutality in fights. And not only that, but, we were like seven, I was maybe 8 at the oldest. So this was a really brutal fight. And at some point in the fight, I just realized that, that I'm scared as hell, I'm getting beaten up. And so of course, he says something along the lines of like, get down on your knees, which of course is making myself even more vulnerable. And so I do it because I'm scared, thinking in good faith that the fight's going to be over. But of course it wasn't. He keeps pounding me. And so at some point I get up and I run and he tracks me down, finds me and, keeps hitting me again. And he's still just kind of beating me up. By the time I finally get home later that day, I'm just like, tears, dry blood, going through the back door of the house. And I hear my oldest brother talking, yelling something at my mom in the kitchen. And I'm thinking it's going to be some form of just like anger. He's going to want to defend me and stick up for me. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but he's really pissed off and I'm glad. Well, as it turns out, he's screaming and yelling, he's a coward. He's a black sheep. All these things that really were the beginning of what became pretty much like a lifelong smear campaign against me in the family. Now, this wasn't just me. I mean, he did this to all of us. But for me, it was always, I could never live down the shame of getting down on my knees, pleading for mercy, and then running away during a fight. And so what happened was after that was that I just tried to fight my way out of the shame. I didn't know this consciously, of course, but I leaned into fighting, and this happened mostly at school. It still happened in the neighborhood a little bit, but it wasn't anything like it had been. I mean, nothing ever like this day again, but I got into a lot of fights at school, and the teachers were, I remember, giving me candy at the end of the week, like on the down low, if I wouldn't get into fights. It got to be, pretty regular. And so I remember being in like fifth grade or sixth grade, and I was in a fight with this one kid. We'd been playing like dodgeball, and so we get into this fist fight, and I remember my fist hitting his jaw, and just the connection of the bone, and it just really just kind of just completely resonated up my arm. And for the first time, I just really became aware of, somebody else's pain, and that I was on the other end of it sometimes. And it just made me nauseous. And so after that fight, I just stopped fighting. I just literally just put my fist down and unclenched them. And so when I did that, it really kind of opened up. And again, none of this was conscious, but it opened up for me an awareness of the way that boys treat each other, the ways we talk to each other, the ways we intimidate each other. And I started to become aware more of the way that, gym teachers, the male gym teachers, would sometimes talk to us. All this kind of consciousness raising just starts happening once my fists are down and unclenched. And there's just this kind of open void for me that things can suddenly start to register that hadn't before. And so that was really kind of the first, I'd say, reckoning, And then throughout my life, I just gradually, increasingly, was just always kind of pushing back against a lot of the kind of traditional masculine norms in really small ways. It was like my own little crusade, So when I was in college, for instance, I had it in my mind that, and I was in a fraternity, and I had it in my mind that I would, the guys who were the biggest jerks in the fraternity, on weekends, I would basically like challenge them to drinking and try to outdrink them. Well, I was always a lightweight, so that never went over well. And so it was always just, waking up horribly hungover the next morning and realizing I'd accomplished absolutely nothing. All I really did was just try to challenge these guys and beat them at their own game. But it was these kinds of things, Sometimes there were more productive ways. Sometimes it would mean stepping in, at a party if there was like a guy screaming at a girl, and stepping in and trying to just make sure that the girl was okay or the young woman was okay in a situation like that. There were productive times. I hadn't completely figured out what I was doing. I just knew that, I was trying to take the same ferocity that brother who I grew to really hate. I tried to take that same ferocity and just take it in the other direction, because I just felt like I wanted to challenge all these things that I thought were so wrong about masculinity. And so the next big reckoning for me occurs when my son is born. I've got a son, and he's now 9 years old. And so my son is born, and I'm terrified because I've got, this crusade that I've been on for so long. I've got so much baggage, about what it means to be a man. And so I'm just flooded, with questions. What does all this mean? Am I, do I really want to strap this little boy, this innocent little boy, with all of my own baggage and all of my animus? It was a good fight, literally and figuratively. I was fighting the good fight, but I knew that I couldn't strap my child with this. This had been my crusade. It had been my fight. On the other hand, could I really just pull back so much that I'm just, feeding him to the wolves? Because I knew fully well by that point, that so much of the script is still so ingrained in so many people of all, when we talk about gender orientations, there are a lot of people who identify as male and female who still buy into this. It's worse with males, but there are a lot of women that do as well in different ways. So I knew that, if I really pulled back too much, it was basically, like I said, just, feeding him to the wolves and having him, embrace this kind of identity that I knew was not going to ultimately was going to serve him or be the healthiest thing for him in terms of his own mental health and well-being. And so that's really what began. That was like the big second reckoning for me that began, this awareness of now that I've got a son, I have to kind of now figure out what this means in terms of what my own crusade had been and how I can make this into something that is, less fraught with anger and frustration, and that's more productive and constructive, and that's really what my book grew out of. It was really all these things I started wrestling with when my son was born. And I had been teaching up to that point a course that I created called The Changing Face of Masculinity. So I'd started that. And that was good because that really kind of got me rethinking a lot of this kind of before my son was born. But like I said, the birth, of your child is just, you can't prepare for, there's only so much you can prepare for that, in terms of kind of where I'd already been. So that's, that ended up being a lot longer answer than I expected to give it to you, but that's the backstory, guys.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, I think it's a pretty, I enjoyed listening to your retrospective on how you kind of thought through these phases, even though you were mentioning it, it wasn't a conscious thought at the time, but kind of how you'd been in that moment where like you'd hit that other kid in the jaw and had this moment, almost like realizing the pain you were initiating, you were also welcoming in by initiating the fighting. And like by actively being a part of it, you were also subjecting yourself to the risk of that. And then you kind of flipped the script, but instead you were almost, like you said, kind of like standing up for the little man in the fight in a way of saying, and I think it's honestly, I think that's a really common like inner dialogue that a lot of young men are like working through themselves and don't really know how to like navigate those thoughts. And because I mean, even to a certain degree, I definitely didn't, I was never the like, let's get in a fist fight. That just, it never occurred to me. I was honestly probably more afraid of getting into a fight than anything. And so it's just so interesting because I know that on the same token, I, as a young man, was probably also too afraid to stand in when something was going bad. Where on the other hand, you had flipped the script, but you were really like stepping in and protecting the young women, like you mentioned. But that was something I probably would have been very scared to do. So it is like a very weird balance of like not being fed to the wolves. And yeah, so I think that, like Nick mentioned before, it's like such an important dialogue that a lot of young men don't actively engage in. And we, as young men, we need to learn how to navigate a lot of these changes that often get, kind of swept under the social rug.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny because, quite a few young men I've spoken with in their 20s, even early 30s, really thoughtful like yourself, young men who are very self-aware, which is fantastic, and very compassionate and understand, you guys are growing, you guys, I really think are probably the first generation that is growing up and that at a young age is really processing and thinking about these things. And it's not easy, believe me. It took me a long time to get to the point that I'm at. But even though it's hard that you guys are wrestling with these things, so many of the young men I interviewed for the book, and even since then have spoken to this idea of, not wanting to jump in because you understand there is a peril involved in the fighting. There really is, I mean, if I had to do it all over again, no, I definitely wouldn't have gone that route. I'm just glad that nothing serious ever happened and that I was young enough when I got into these fights that it just, the stakes weren't that high. But one of the things that I think our culture still teaches a lot of young boys and young men, and to be honest, I think that a lot of these action hero franchise movies don't help, is the idea that to be a man of action, which means you will throw a punch if and when you feel like you're supposed to. Not even that you need to, but that you're supposed to. You'll be ready to do it. And I think that is a really slippery slope because a lot of guys feel shame deep down that, well, I know it's not the best thing for men to perpetuate this. On the other hand, I see so many guys doing it, so many guys who are respected, so many guys who are revered, so many, we see these movies and we think that, these big jacked guys, that this is the way you stand your ground, and that somehow you're cowardly or less than if you don't do that. And so I feel like there's a real kind of paradox in the minds of a lot of young men. And one of the things, that I always try to say, which of course I can say, it's easier for me to say it than it is to be the one on the other end receiving it. But it's that, and this is so much of what I'm trying to talk about in the book. And I try to talk about this with my son, who's 9 now. You don't have to prove yourself, to be a man. You're not a competent man because you're ready to throw a punch. One of the things I say in the book is that, the muscle that boys and men need much more of is in the heart, far more than it is in the bicep. That really is the strength that I think really we need moving forward from men. We need a lot more of that. And I think the fact that there's any doubt in any man's mind that if he's not willing to throw a punch, that it somehow makes him less competent as a man, we've got to work through that, because I really don't think that is the measure of a man at all.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I think I drew an interesting parallel in my head when you were describing like that action hero. I mean, I think there's also a huge correlation between the level of like societal praise we give, like people in sports who are like this aggressor, physical, absolutely, like football being a huge sport that praises this. And, I mean, we had the New Orleans Saints had their targeting scandal where they were literally paying them bonuses to target people and injure them. So
right?
Yeah, the headhunting thing. So it's just it is so societally normal on one aspect. And then we so heavily contradict ourselves by like, there's also like that side of society that wants to like blame or shame that act. And yeah, I feel like, again, just to reiterate the fact that like, I'm so happy we're having this conversation, because I think this is going to really help parse out kind of some of these nuances that are present within this conversation that young men need to talk about. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, Brendan, because we are very much, when it comes to this discussion about masculinity, we are very much in a kind of almost like a schizophrenic state. And what I mean by that is that you alluded to that very much these kind of polar places that we're coming from when it comes to masculinity. On the one hand, there's, what I would call healthy masculinity, which is not reaching for violence every time you feel threatened or shamed. And then on the other hand, there's that feeling of, making the big hits, dominating on the field or on the court, and that is the way that a man really asserts himself and gets his validation. When I was growing up, I mean, it was much more of a balance. It really was. It's really bizarre how we're kind of in this really kind of antithetical polarities right now. When I was thinking about when you were talking about football, there was no headhunting going when I was growing up with football. I was never even a huge football fan, but I know that there wasn't headhunting. Guys went out, and the goal was not to maim anybody, just to win. It was never about dominance. It was about winning, and there really was a strong emphasis on sportsmanship, as crazy as that may sound. And so, yes, it's true that far more men kind of bought into this idea of these traditional masculine norms. But that said, there also was, a degree of restraint and more nuance to this idea of masculinity. Now it's flagrant. It's over the top. Mm-hmm. It's bald, and we really are at these two extremes. Yeah. And in the, and so it's, it's not so much about how do we find the middle. It's about how do we get people who are following this path of this kind of domination ethos, whether it's on the court or off the court, on the court or off the court. Sorry about that. How do we get them to recalibrate, to reimagine this idea that this isn't what validates yourself as a man, let alone a good man or a competent man, and trying to show them that these are the other things that really validate that, and that there's nothing wrong with some aggression and there's nothing wrong with winning. But when we take it to the extreme that, other people are the enemy and they have to be maimed or injured to win, things have gotten way, way, off the rails when that is being condoned, and we're accepting, those kinds of insane hits, whether it's hockey or especially, football. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So when you were talking about the action heroes in these different types of movies and portraying men in this way that they have to take action and there's like an immediate response, I thought something that I really enjoyed from the book was talking about how you have different teachers' testimonies in classrooms, and there's research behind it that it's likely that boys will ask fewer questions, with the justification of wanting to know the right answer or feeling like they have to know the right answer, and not being equipped with it and exposing that vulnerability is a risk. And I think like that's something that's on maybe that more minute level, but has almost a greater impact. Like widespread is something that's so impactful that, I just never like put two and two together, but I could definitely tell in like my own experience, like reflecting back, maybe I didn't know what it was as to why I didn't want to speak up in class or ask a question. But I think that was definitely a piece of it, was that like I felt like I was maybe supposed to know. And if I said something that was wrong or acted like I was vulnerable in that moment, then it was showing a weakness to myself, So I just really enjoyed that you really touched on that piece in the book.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate that. First of all, that was very eloquently explained. You really unpacked it beautifully. Thank you. You really did.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And that's a great analogy. And you're exactly right. That's exactly what it is. You're right. It's far more prevalent for boys and for young men. It's far more prevalent, right, than that domination ethos. And you're right. It does have higher stakes, because one of the things, that I realized when I was doing the research is that it's not a coincidence that, when you look at the extremes of education, you've got, far more boys and young men dropping out of high school and college as well than young girls and young women. You've got a vast difference, and I'm sure you guys have seen this often across the board with grades, with getting homework done, with just a work ethic, huge difference in just the work ethic. And then even so far as, if and when guys do graduate from college, girls and young women are getting entry-level jobs now at higher rates than boys and young men. And I don't think at all there's any kind of bias there against, young men. I don't think that's it at all. I think that a lot of employers realize that, a lot of girls and young women are willing to let people see them sweat. They're willing to work hard, and they're not going to back down and say, yeah, I'm working hard and I'm asking questions and I'm really trying to make sense of this, and they're not going to back down. And that's what has been lost, I think, with boys and young men. You still will occasionally see, and I've been teaching for a while and I see this, I'll still occasionally see young men, trying to like dominate, to feel like they've got to dominate the conversation. But I don't see that as much as it probably happened in the past. Now there's just a lot of guys sitting there basically with their hand, sitting on their hands. And you're right, they're not engaging as much, and they're not asking as many questions, and they're not asking for help nearly as much outside of class as the young women are. And I really do think it's a more, as you said, a more nuanced form of this kind of, traditional masculine script at work. It's the idea that, like you said, guys should have the answers, and guys should have the answers, or they should have a response, and they should be right as much of the time as possible. there's no place in there for curiosity, guys, right?
Yeah.
There's no place in there for questions because questions immediately expose you as not knowing the answer and not having an answer in the affirmative. And so that is going to make a lot of guys feel, well, if I take a chance and I'm wrong, man, I can't look wrong, and I can't look wrong, in front of the class. And it's not that you've got girls and young women constantly with their hands up endlessly. That's not the case. A lot of girls and young women also don't want to appear vulnerable either in this day and age. But my experience has been, and I think it's true of a lot of educators, we do see far more girls and young women being involved in conversations than the guys. And we do see them getting their assignments in on time. We do see them seeking help a lot more. And they are more willing to take risks by asking questions. And you're right, I do talk a lot about that in the book, because I think that is a really core thing that would help boys and young men, not just in school, but in the workplace. I was doing this call-in with a group, and it was I forgot what it was, but it was a call-in, and there was another guest and myself, and somebody had a question. It was all young adults, and she had a question. She said, a lot of guys in my workplace, just want to dominate the conversations, right? They, not surprisingly, this isn't the workplace; it's beyond the classroom. They want to dominate the conversations, and we have to really work hard to get them to kind of pull back. And she said, how can we do that? And I said, one of the things that I think we really need to get guys to learn, if we can't do it when they're in school, we can still do it in the workplace, is asking a really smart, thoughtful question. This goes back to the idea of questions, because that shows that you're listening, which is, as you guys have learned, it's a really valuable thing in all relationships, whether it's interpersonal or intrapersonal. Listening is a really important skill. You guys know that. You're podcasters now. You know this.
That's right.
Right. But the other thing too is that it shows that not only are you listening, but you're thinking and really taking what they're saying seriously, and you're trying to add to the conversation, not dominate it, not show how smart you are, but you're trying to add to the collaboration of creating something bigger. And in a workplace, that's everything, right? Workplaces are getting more collaborative. And so questions are much more important that are going to help the team, rather than just the guy sitting there saying, I've got all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important we teach this in the classroom.
Yeah, this resonates with my personal story, I feel like, a lot. And Nick and I have even talked about this very idea a lot. And I was the total curious kid. And, I love, looking back that my parents totally fostered my curiosity. They let me, literally, I was just curious. I just took apart a remote control car when I was a kid. I vividly remember this. I just wanted to see what the motor looked like. I had no real reason other than just being curious. So I took apart a remote control car. Just took a little screwdriver, just did it. And it came out with this little thing. I was like, okay, that was cool. But now I know. So and I vividly remember there was a phase of my youth, probably sometime in high school, later years in high school, where I just really got comfortable. I don't really know what triggered it, but I just really got comfortable asking questions. I was definitely not the intelligence leader of my age group growing up. I had, to be honest, I had a lot of highly intelligent people in my K through 8. I went to a private school, had lots of great intelligent people, to be honest, that I went to school with. And I always felt like I was on the lower quarter, and I wasn't upset with myself about it, but I just knew that I wasn't. And I think there's something about having been surrounded by that level of intelligence and still feeling like I fit in, even if it wasn't on the intelligence landscape, that really allowed me to continue to develop. Because this is what Nick and I have talked about multiple times, is there was definitely a point where, whether it be high school or college, where I felt my ability to critically think really shifted. And it goes right hand in hand with what you were just saying about like listening, analyzing data coming in, and not thinking that I have to have the answer, but maybe I can provide something that will allow us to come to a new realization. It wasn't about having the right answer. It was about continuing to foster the thought process and all that. And yeah, man, like when I think back, like the fact that I developed, and again, I'd have to really dig deep to figure out how it happened, but the fact that I developed that ability is something I'm extremely grateful for, because I know how much like feel like I'm more conscious of like, am I dominating my workplace team call? And like really trying to contribute, but trying not to dominate. And it's like a level of awareness that I've developed, I think, from just the baseline of like listening and thinking first, and then figuring out where I can contribute. And if I have a question, not being self-conscious of that question. So
that's a great point, Brendan. That really is. And that backstory that's a really great story. I want to talk about your story in just one second, but one of the things that I do a lot to really up my own game is I pay attention to the women in the room who are very sharp, because they're great at picking up on the social cues. They're listening like hell, and they're processing, and they're thinking, what can I do to advance this conversation? That is, men could benefit so much from learning this. And it sounds like, Brendan, what you're talking about is really kind of getting you on that path, because, I was the same way. I was never, I was always on the, on the lower end. Things didn't really start to click for me until I was way out of college, where I started to feel like, okay, so maybe I am smarter. I always thought I was smarter than it seemed like I was. So I can definitely relate to feeling like, you're basically being outclassed. But, the thing that we learn, of course, from grit is that it's all about the willingness to stay with it and stay determined, and just to keep chipping away. And that's what it is, And I think that one of the things you guys, if you haven't already seen, you will see, is that the people who will continue to keep stepping up and succeeding are going to be the ones who are paying attention to, to the right cues that are more silent, and that are doing the listening. And that when they do have a question, it's usually something that really is adding to the conversation. And I think that is really the way, in an increasingly collaborative culture, right, in workplaces, like you talked about, that's the way to add to, to what employers really are looking for ultimately, which is the contributions you can make as a team player, not just to be a standout. Employers mostly aren't looking for Michael Jordans anymore. And that's a really good thing. They're looking for, how can you stand out as a team player? And that's a really important thing, because to get to that level requires all these skills that we're talking about, and these are all really important interpersonal skills that boys are really missing out on, because we're still not really encouraging them, when they're young, and when they're in the classroom, and when they're in the workplace. We're still not encouraging them. Look at it, think of it this way, try to contribute to this part of the conversation. One of the things for me that really helped, was doing the work with my wife in our relationship. And she used to say to me early on, instead of coming at me with, say, a criticism, come at me with curiosity. Ask me why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Or why did you just say what you just said? And it was just, oh my God, that's brilliant. Because doing that in a relationship is only going to serve the relationship, because it de-escalates the tension, right? And it coming from a place of curiosity, who wouldn't rather have that than accusation? But it's the same thing, in our work relationships. It's coming from a place of curiosity. This is something that is so small and would be so revolutionary for so many young men, and boys to be taught this. It's, if I thought I could make a book out of it, I would do a second book and do it on that. But this really is something that is so small but revolutionary for boys, because it's something, as we're talking about, is so essential to succeeding in the workplace as well now.
Yeah. And there's a whole piece about it with like seeking help too. Like people
Huge.
can't help you if you're going to remain silent, or at least they can't as much as they'd like to. So if you can't express how you're feeling, or even say something to where somebody else will then be curious about why you said that, and you're not going to be on the receiving end of it, then there can't be any progress in that sense.
That's
and,
right.
Yeah. And I think too, it's something you named in the book as well, which is definitely something that gets talked a lot about in psychology, but I don't think I ever really applied it to like masculinity specifically, was the idea of like cognitive dissonance and how pervasive it is with this. Like, we want to ask a question because we don't know an answer, but we don't want to come off as vulnerable because we think that we should know the answer. So we're just going to shove that down and maybe we'll address it later, but we know we won't. So we'll just keep doing that. So there's this like constant cycle in our mind of like, we need to be vulnerable, but we shouldn't, so we can't.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Nick. That really is. It's a great way to put it. It's exactly right. It's, and it's that idea that, well, what that really speaks to, the subtext is, is that, well, at least my man card is stamped. At least I can hold my head high, that I didn't come off looking like a vulnerable fool in class. And at least I can come out of there. And yet, on the other hand, you just completely undermined yourself in terms of your own learning process, because one of the things that'll happen is that, and it speaks to what you were just talking about, Nick, is the idea that if you're not going to say anything, you're going to be far less likely, if you're so concerned about how you're coming off, if your consciousness is constantly out here instead of from within, then you're going to be far less likely to ask for help, because you don't want to appear as somebody that needs help. You want to appear as somebody who, if you're taught that a competent man does things on his own, why the hell are you going to go ask for help, right? You're literally and figuratively going to keep sitting on your hands, because it's going to feel like you feel less competent if you have to ask for help. So what you talk about it being a vicious cycle, that's exactly what it is. And you're also right that it's this incredibly, it's really under the radar, but it's so prevalent. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me really start to think about like the idea of how young boys are developing like a healthy ego, and I feel like a lot of this, what we're talking about in some ways can be like a damaged ego, and like this idea of young males like growing up thinking they have to protect their ego in a way. Mm-hmm. When do you see ego as like being a problem in this equation, and how maybe would you recommend that maybe a parent of a young man who's trying to like foster a young man and help develop them in a way that is going to be like more serving to society? How maybe should people introduce some of these like healthy ego habits, or like healthy forms of failure, or like where can parents go for that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brendan. That whole idea, it does have to be modeled in the home. It has to be encouraged in the home. And what that means is that, both parents, and especially if there is a father present, because, boys are always going to look to their fathers, for better and for worse. But it means that, that both parents, and especially the father, need to be modeling, a type of humility and a type of willingness to admit that they're wrong. That's huge, because when you talk about this idea of ego, one of the things that so many men unconsciously, unwittingly are passing on to their sons and they're modeling are these ways that are very kind of traditional, scripted, traditional masculinity of, the way that they communicate. They're not listening, they're interrupting, right? They feel like they've got to dominate the conversation lest they appear wrong, and they go in the defensive when someone like seems to be attacking their own position. And so, really small things can go a long way with boys and young men. And one of the ways that we can really model this is the idea about listening. Not just thinking about, okay, I'm going to wait till this person is done, and then I'm going to come in with my own response. but it's really, modeling when there's conversations with, with the parent, with other siblings, with their partner, their spouse, modeling a patience and a real willingness to listen and to ask questions, and to say, and to be willing to say, that asking questions in the home is a really important thing, as opposed to accusations. But then the other thing too is a willingness to say you're wrong. One of the things I've started doing with my 9-year-old son, because I really want him to see this modeled, is when, if he and I are having a disagreement, he and I are both big feeling guys. If you're like this, when you're a kid, you're pretty much like this when you're an adult. You're wired. You're the way you're wired, and he's like me. He's a person with big feelings, and so when there might be a time when we might have a little bit of a disagreement, and I can tell his temper is getting hotter than mine. If it's something that maybe I said that triggered that, and I know that I'm at fault, or if I came at him with something that, really upset him, not so much what I said, but how I said it, because maybe my tone was a little bit reactive. In either case, I will give it a little bit of time, for him to be often in another room. And I will go to him and I'll say, can I just share with you something? We don't have to talk right now. It doesn't have to be a back and forth, but just let me explain to you, why I said what I said. And a lot of times I'll say to him, what I just said or how I said it to you, I was wrong. And let me tell you why I was wrong. And let me tell you why I got so upset. Often that's the case where he will say or do something. He's also very impulsive. And so he'll say or do something, and then I don't explode on him, but I might get a little bit upset. And because he's a very sensitive person, his feelings get hurt quickly. And then he runs off to another room. But I'll always find him eventually and let him know, number one, if I need to apologize, I will apologize and tell him why I was wrong. But then the second thing is I'll also model for him the importance of getting beyond the anger, because that's another thing that, as you guys know, you're nodding, you know what I'm talking about. That's the big go-to emotion that is so acceptable, right? And that is so tacitly accepted in our culture in terms of boys and men can react with anger. And I'll say to him, let me tell you what was beneath my anger. I was afraid. This is what I was afraid about. It's also really important for boys and men to learn not to be afraid of fear. That is so huge. We need to teach boys and men not to be afraid of fear, to normalize it. Because my God, everybody experiences it, right?
Yeah.
And so these are ways that chip away at that ego you were talking about, Brendan. They chip away at that. These are ways of just simple modeling behavior that can come from a dad or a mother, if it's a single mother, but that send the message that you are fallible, you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Normalize that. Normalize fear. Let our children know why we reacted the way that we reacted, rather than it being a mystery and it just feeling to them like they are being shamed and they don't understand why. But these are the ways that we unravel the potential for that ego that you were talking about that doesn't serve boys and men as they get older.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what you just said resonates with me, and I'll share some more, personal anecdotes from my youth. My mom never let a disagreement or argument last more than 5 minutes. I would go to my room, exactly what you're describing. I would go to my room, argument had happened. It would not have been more than 5 minutes before she was in there doing exactly what you said, apologizing, giving me an explanation of what happened and why she felt the way she did. And, as a result, I feel like I have a pretty good tendency to handle my anger emotion with a lot of restraint, because I just kind of get it. Like, I've seen that play out a certain way. And the biggest one that resonated with me was I don't hold on to it at all. I can let things go like it's and I've seen people in my life and like friends and things of that nature who really can hold on and like hold grudges. And it's just like, and I'm just like, man, if only they knew what I knew about how little I feel like this is serving them to hold on to this, like the unbelievable weight that gets lifted off your shoulders when you're able to like really just have that conversation, come to an understanding, and try and let go of that is an unbelievable feeling. So yeah, that was why I was nodding on that one, because that, like, I really know people who, are still working on that, and it's, yeah, it's just like, it's really cool to see when somebody is starting to like work through it, and I know firsthand how much it is like a benefit to work through. So.
That's a great example. It's a fantastic, and what also is great is that you talked about the physical sensation of it, how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
The way to me that it feels after I do that with my son, I literally walk away feeling like chains have been taken off of me. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. The word that comes to mind for me, if not lightness, like you were talking about, Brendan, I feel liberated.
Mm-hmm.
I really feel, like completely liberated. Like, man, the shackles are off. I am not beholden to this old script any longer. I am changing it. And more importantly, I'm changing it for my son. Because the minute he was born, one of the other fears that I was talking about, the fears of being a father to a son, one of the other fears was that I didn't want to raise a boy that was going to contribute to the problems as a young man that we're seeing, as so many at the hands of so many young men. We could talk about all the examples of violence. We could talk about, sexual assault, all those things, and I thought, I've got to get my act together and figure out, how to teach him so that he doesn't have to go through that feeling of feeling liberated, right? Or feeling like, but even so, what you're talking about, Brendan, that idea of feeling so much lighter, that's something that I think he's just in the very beginning stages, and he's not there yet, of starting to have that experience, that sensation. And that's one of the things that, with boys and men, that's a lot of the times the place we've got to start, is because a lot of times they can't always put words to those deeper emotions and feelings.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What is the physical sensation, right?
Yeah.
What is the physical sensation you're experiencing? Let's start with that. And that's a good place to start. Is just asking that question.
I mean, yeah, it's so funny to think, but I think it often gets overlooked from like an adult looking at kids' perspective. It's hard to put yourself back in the presence of mind where you think this person's, in your case, only been on the planet for 9 years. They can't describe what's happening right now. They don't fully understand what's going on in them. And a lot of times, like you said, those tagging actions to the resulting emotion and like utilizing that to help describe what is happening and the benefits of moving on, and identifying when your son maybe has done a good job at moving on so that he knows, okay, that's the opposite of what we were talking about last time, is like, is a great way for them to start to like learn about like how to feel like good in their own bodies. I feel like, because like at, 9 years old, we wouldn't know how to talk about like what we're talking about right now, right? Like, I mean, there's kids are getting pretty smart these days, but a lot of it would probably just go over their head. And so I think I love that, like just like using emotions and situations to really help, teach them how to manage these emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the time and the place, because it requires us as the adults to kind of step back. And again, this is very much an ego thing of letting go of whether or not I was right or wrong. It's about, how can I turn this literally into a teaching moment? But it really becomes a teaching moment for the adult in the room as well. Because when I do things like that, I'm constantly helping myself learn, about, a greater degree of self-awareness, right? And what you talked about, Brendan, the idea of learning to let it go. Learning to get perspective and step back, not be so tied to the feeling, to the emotion, and just trying to, that idea of reminding ourselves we don't have to be our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an important thing, especially for boys and men, because our reactivity, we are taught at a young age, that our reactivity and our willingness to kind of reach for aggression, is a really positive thing, and it's a way to be validated. And of course, we all know it's not. And so, dialing back on that reactivity is a really important thing to learn. It's something I'm still in the process of learning myself, because I've always been a very emotional person. I'm like having to unlearn, rechannel these little, synaptical, sluices, and relearn ways of not being reactive, not being so tied to my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the biggest gifts I can give my son, as a would-be burgeoning man.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost unfortunate that this has to exist, but there's something that I've used in clinical work, which is this like image of an iceberg. And at the top of the iceberg above the water is the emotion of anger. And then underneath are all these different types of emotions. Because like we've been saying, like a lot of young boys express all their feelings through one emotion, being anger. And if you present them with something like this, like it becomes so apparent that there's like loneliness or sadness or anxiety, some type of longing for like a connection, that's all underlying this one emotion that seems to be like socially acceptable, I guess, almost. But then at the same time, it's not, because then systemically we like punish anger and then throw people into prisons or different types of facilities to where they still don't have connection. Anger is like still perpetuated. So that's just like, I think this is just so important because like we're saying, it happens on these smaller scales of like maybe just asking a question, but we see how this plays out in a longer term or in a longer way. And like you have said in the book as well, and like the highest suicide risk is like white males over 65. And
it's dropping.
Yeah. Right. And of course there's like several different like racial factors that come into play with this. Like I know boys of color specifically are really stigmatized and stereotyped to be really angry, and they like have conduct problems, which just creates a pipeline of really chaotic like perceptions of how these people are going to be, and it's so dangerous.
Yeah, you're right. It is, Nick. It's incredibly dangerous, and a lot of it is because, of course, what's being normalized for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
As boys and burgeoning men. That is I love that analogy, man. That is such a great analogy of the iceberg right above the water. Yeah. Man, I mean, that drills it down perfectly right there. It really does. That is such a good analogy. Yeah. And so unfortunately, of course you're right about that suicide rate, right? But we also see, and you guys probably know this, the rate of suicide is decreased down to like 10 now, which is utterly shocking and so disturbing. But it's also becoming, while young women are still the ones who are probably most at risk, sadly, we're also seeing that gap closing, and I think we'll continue to see it close with boys and young men. It's one of the things that I became convinced of through the book, and doing a book is a really cool thing because, you guys clearly love learning, and you guys could really relate to this. The journey teaches you so much, right? There's so many things that just became so solidified and just kind of exploded in my consciousness. And one of those things was that, we are not in a place as a culture yet. I mean, we still have work to do, of course, where, we need to get dads and moms to get on board with this kind of language in the home. And we're not there yet. And that's another thing that is one of the chapters in my book, How We Talk to Boys, that I think is just so fundamental and core. But if we can't do it in the homes, I really do believe that we need to start doing this to some degree in the schools. I really do. There are a few school programs around the country that are really good examples of this. And they model it based on men's groups, where you've got this configuration of guys sitting in a circle. Excuse me. And it's very carefully facilitated. And the word that they use in men's groups that I think is such an apt word is they call it a container. And it's not that everything, it's because, and for all the right reasons, it's called a container, because everything stays inside. Nothing leaves the container. And one of the things that does is it creates a huge degree of emotional trust, which is not something that we are raised as burgeoning men to have in each other. Guys are good at saying, I've got your back, and they mean it. A lot of our friends, guys we know, would be willing, if some guy was picking on us, to step in and say, hey man, is there a problem here? A lot of our friends would do that, but a lot of guys are not there for us emotionally. That is not a place that we are encouraged to be there for. And when you create that container, what implicitly happens is there is an emotional trust that is so powerful to create. That alone, I think, is reason enough to do this. It teaches boys and men how to bear witness to other guys suffering, because then it becomes permission, without them ever realizing it, for them to speak up and to share their loneliness, their sadness, their confusion, their frustration. All that stuff comes out as more than just anger, because what happens is a decent facilitator will say, you're angry, but let's get to beneath what is really triggering your anger. And so that kind of thing, there are a precious few programs around the country that are doing this, but I really do think, and they only meet once a week, but they have fantastic results. They meet once a week for like a class time. And, and I just think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
One of the places, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add something, but I'll remember if you want to finish your thought first.
The only other thing I wanted to say was, and I read about this in the book, one of the best experiences I had with this experience was in a prison in Massachusetts. And in this prison in Massachusetts, there were, all these men who are there because they adhered so well to that script for too long. And because of the environments they grew up in, it became even more toxic for them. And so one of the things that was so profound, was to hear guys sitting there talking, because when you do these little circles, it's very common to do what's called a check-in. And you say, okay, like how are you feeling physically? Every guy is supposed to talk about how they're feeling physically, how they're doing mentally or intellectually, how they're doing emotionally and or spiritually. And one of the guys was talking about how he was so torn up because 2 days before that, it had been Father's Day. And he tried, with the one call that he could make that day, he tried calling his ex, and she wouldn't let him talk to their daughter, who's like 3 or 4 years old, on Father's Day, and they didn't call him. And he was just completely torn up. And I thought, as much as I feel awful for this man who clearly is suffering, this is the way you do it. This is the way you do it. And you could literally feel, the level of it. There was a lot of anxiety and nervousness at these guys having to share these things in a circle, let alone with me, this complete interloper from the outside coming in, being worried, of course, about how they're going to be judged and perceived. A writer, no less, coming in to write about this, and a researcher. But you could just see the guys softly nodding their heads. That is the kind of thing, that kind of support. You don't even need these guys saying, "Oh, it's okay, dude, we got you." That's great. But just to have guys sitting there, being able to look at this guy and him to see them softly nodding their heads is a kind of validation that they don't get for those kinds of feelings. And there was a lot more to that experience that was even more amazing, but I won't go into those weeds. What were you going to say, Brendan? Yeah,
I was just going to share that Nick and I both were very privileged to go to the same high school. And it was a private high school that did a senior year, like 4-day long, like retreat, I guess, and it was an all boys school. And so it was all boys on this retreat, and you go in small groups, and in that small group, you're even broken into smaller groups. And I literally think that everything you just described on like these small groups, really creating an incredibly safe space for people to share and open up. And like there were people on this that I knew for 4 years. And I went on this retreat, and we would sit around this circle, or like this one moment in the chapel that I specifically remember, like where, you would never imagine 6 high school boys with a teacher proctor who's like guiding a discussion on something would all just be in absolute tears, just like melting down our faces, but like unbelievably impactful for the vast majority of people who get to, everybody's able to partake in but you don't have to do it. But everybody I know who's done it just leaves there with like a completely altered perspective on, just being a little bit vulnerable and like just kind of like putting some of that guard down and like maybe experiencing another emotion that maybe you hadn't, and gaining the communal respect of other people and that are like in your group. I think, so I would heavily advocate for those types of programs. I know some church groups outside that my friend has been a part of. I was never a part of this, but they did little retreats like this through the church. So if people find out about like retreats like that, where they can go and like, be part of a community that's going to have these like very guided, open, vulnerable moments, I think they can be incredibly impactful, and obviously very specifically for young men who don't often get that kind of exposure.
That's right. That's exactly right. And, I'm really so glad you guys had that experience, because now you completely resonate with what I'm talking about, the value of it.
Yeah.
But imagine though, I've heard that kind of similar thing with other boys' schools. Imagine if you take that, and you did that just in a class once a week. Crazy. My God, imagine kind of, you talked about the safe space, Brendan. Imagine that kind of space. And you think you come out of that thing at the end of the year often, or close to the end of the year, and you feel closer, and that's great. But imagine the kind of support and the kind of depth of knowing and really caring and the strength of support that would be created if that happened earlier in the year and it went throughout the year. Because it'd be the ups and the downs of the academic year. How incredibly helpful would that be for guys to have?
That repetition of like flexing that emotional muscle would be like so important to like ingraining that skill. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Perfectly said, the emotional muscle. And that's exactly what I was talking about before. That's the muscle that we as guys need to learn to develop, and it's just figuratively was saying it, but the heart muscle. Mm-hmm. But that's exactly right. We need to learn to use that emotional muscle. Yeah. Because it's fantastic to have that. But then just to do it that one time, while it's powerful in and of itself, a lot of guys will go back to what is safe and familiar after that, which is not going back to that place of vulnerability, because they're not going to have it. Most guys won't find it again. They won't have that space to create it. And so, but if you learn with practice, right, to use that emotional muscle throughout, it's going to also change the neural pathways in the brain, and the ways to react, and the ways to respond, and the ways that you can access and process what you're really feeling, which means that when you go off to college, you're going to say, you know what, man, I've got to find some guys who can do this with me. And if I've got to, I will create it. If it's just a few guys, cool. Doesn't matter, as long as we can sit around and do this. There was this great young man who I taught at the university where I teach, Towson. He was in the honors college where I teach a lot. And so I interviewed him in one of the chapters, and he talked about how he was struggling with really bad depression in high school, and tried talking to his dad once or twice. And his dad basically shut him down, basically along the lines of, this isn't the kind of thing that I'm comfortable talking about. And so what happened was, not surprisingly, come home to his room, shut the door, all alone, that just manifesting that kind of deep emotional loneliness. Sadly, not surprisingly, he became, he had started having suicidal thoughts. And this one guy who sat next to him in calculus took him under his wing. And he said, you should come over to my house on Friday night and hang out. Well, this young man that I've been talking about didn't have a lot of friends. And luckily he took this other guy that he became his friend in calculus class up on his offer, because on Friday nights they would hang out in this guy's basement, and they would basically create a circle of chairs like what we're talking about, and they would take the TV remote and pass it around pretending it was a microphone. And I love that these guys in high school like got on board with this, Yeah. I mean, because if they were outside of the circle, they would have completely scoffed at this idea about a remote playing a microphone, right? But they would pass this thing around, and they all took it seriously. So there was this positive peer pressure, right? Mm-hmm. And so they all took it seriously, and they would talk into this stupid little TV remote, and they would all own up because they knew that they had to, just like being in that group, in like a men's group, or what you guys probably did that weekend with school, with that retreat. They knew that they really had to own up and really pony up because all the other guys were doing it. And so they did that into this little TV remote. And he said, I would leave there feeling, surprise, surprise, lighter. Mm. I felt, as you said, as if a weight had been taken off my chest. That was the beginning of his depression starting to dissipate.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, and this is the kind of thing, it's like, I came through that book, and many times during the book, I just felt like a fog was clearing, and I was just seeing with sharper eyes than I'd ever seen before because of this journey. And this was one of those things, watching, coming out of that prison with the men's group, there was more to that story that really kind of was just so overpowering. But even when I would just sit in with these other men's groups, it didn't matter where, and whether they were facilitated really well or not, there was always this just coming out of it and just this awareness and this realization more and more of, this is what boys need. Yes, it would be great to get more and more parents to learn how to talk to boys, how to talk to and not to talk to boys in certain ways. And I really think that that's an important thing. But I really am more convinced than ever, after once the fog is cleared and going through this journey, that this is, schools really are the place to do this. And, it's like, you won't be surprised to hear this. Whenever I bring this up, when I'll talk a lot at boys' schools, at private schools, there'll always be this resistance. We're not psychologists, we can't do this. And I'd say, look, this is so much easier. I understand the resistance. I know where that's coming from. I totally get that. But if you would just trust me on this, whether or not you do it or not, you just need to trust me that if you want to embrace this at all, there are ways we can do this where it's not going to feel so scary or so, way out of your league. There are ways we can do this where we can meet you halfway, and you don't have to be a psychologist to do this. Because one of the things that understandably comes up when educators say that, is that, okay, so all you're really doing is you're picking up on if there is a boy that is having serious anxiety or depression, and you can then go to the school counselor and say, hey, I'm flagging this for you. We should probably do something to help this guy. But it's just really, this is something that that I've just, from the journey of this book, I'm just convinced schools are just a natural place for this to happen.
Yeah. And my experience to what Brendan was talking about, because we're in different grades, but on the same retreat, is that like there's the experience of these boys, young men, really displaying all of these emotions, and it's extreme. Like it's like the floodgates just open and everything's opening up. And I think that just speaks so much to how present this is, that like the vulnerability is shut down. And then once they're given a chance and it's socially acceptable and in a contained space, then it's like, okay, I can get all this out off of me. And yeah, that I think you both naming that feeling of feeling lighter is like so spot on, because that's, I feel like, what everyone feels, but then they go back to real world and they feel like they got to kind of close up again. That space is no longer there. And so you just reflect back on it positively, but yeah, it's not repetitive, and it's that one moment and you let go of everything. And now back to the norms.
Yeah,
that's exactly. Yep. That's a excellent point, Nick. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is exactly what happens. Mm-hmm. These retreats are a great idea. They're a fantastic idea. You both can bear witness to that. But the problem is that you are physically in a very different space where it's much easier in the being very far away, like you said, Nick, from everything and everyone else that's familiar. In that environment, it's much easier to achieve that. like you said, the real work is when you go back and you feel like, okay, I am in this space where to do it here initially would feel very odd and jarring. But imagine if you did it and you routinized that in the familiar space of school, and you've got to go out that door and carry on with the rest of your day. You can do it. We can do it. We can find ways to do that, and doing that in a familiar space is going to be much more, you're going to be able to translate and transfer everything you're learning outside of that door, much more so than if you're doing it for a weekend in an isolated place where it feels a lot safer because you're away from everyone who you feel like can judge you. But it's much more impactful and powerful to carry it over into the places like, if you're learning something about, like we're talking about curiosity, and let's say all the guys are talking about the importance, of learning how to ask questions and being quiet more. As well as I do, that message that is still in the front of your brain, when you walk out that door and go into your next class, you're going to be more likely to take what you just learned and apply it into the next classroom than you would be, a week or so later when you get back to school. And like you said, Nick, it's out of sight, out of mind. Like you said, I look back on this fondly. It was nice, but it's scary. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to take what is scary outside of that one isolated experience and apply it to the rest of your life. One of the things that I often would ask guys when I would talk to them at the end of men's groups is I'd say, do you guys practice this stuff outside of here? And a lot of the older men would say, no. And I'd say, well, why not? And they'd say, well, because it's not going to be received in the same way. Well, of course it won't. They're absolutely right. And it's say, okay, well, but at the very least, you've got it in here, and it's helping you with anxiety and depression and anything else, and that's great. We can leave it at that. But imagine how much more powerful and transformative it's going to be if you can learn to not just feel safe and comfortable and process things in the container, but if you can start to apply that in your everyday life, man, that is going to be a shift in your own paradigm. Mm-hmm. That's where the real power comes in. And that's really where I feel like for a lot of these men's groups, that needs to be the next step, because even some of the younger guys I talked with said that they're not at that place yet where they can take what they practiced and learned outside of it. And when I'm talking about these guys not doing it, it's not as a judgment, but it's just that the importance of learning to transfer that into finding slowly in your own time ways to really incorporate that into your everyday life, because that, of course, is how the change is going to really be affected, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really makes me think about this whole perspective of like raising young men through the lens of like an evolutionary standpoint, and like really trying to figure out how, if nature was left to be nature, how would this maybe have developed through the course of a young man's life? And Nick and I were kind of tossing this idea around before, and the idea of like having a tribe of people, like a community that is like very codependent on one another, having a lot of male role models present, and having almost like this coming of age point in your youth development to where you maybe are like going through a ceremony and you've like earned this right to be considered a man amongst your tribe. And then you're like able to contribute to the greater cause of like what the men maybe did in that unit. And I feel like in so many ways, we are like at the most like stripped down version of that, where like our modern society has pulled out this like multiple role models and like potential in a lot of places where you're just not exposed to a lot of these like men who can be like good guiding lights for you. There's no coming of age type of a scenario anymore. You're just kind of expected and thrust into it. Do you think about, in terms of like taking everything that you just were talking about with these men's groups and kind of creating it so that it's more acceptable in like a daily life setting and more accessible maybe. Do you think about the role of like maybe other communities and how they can like help foster this in young men? Or is like school really that community that you've identified where like this needs to be like intertwined into, getting young men to a place where we can like really tap into the needs of their development in that sense?
Yeah. So, you're talking about rites of passage.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, right. And so we know that there's still a lot of non-Western civilizations, especially still a lot of tribal cultures that still do that. Yeah, I mean, I think with rites of passage, I think that, even if we're talking outside of what I was proposing in terms of schools, for a long time, not surprisingly, when organized religion was much more common in this culture, that was a place where a lot of people did it. They would, go through confirmation classes, they would get bar mitzvahed. And these were considered rites of passage. In terms of Judaism, the whole bar mitzvah thing is specifically for boys, becoming young men. But so much of that, really, I'd say really since as organized religion since the 1970s has become less and less of an important thing for us. There's really been this kind of this just kind of like shotgun approach, as you're talking about, that's, that is not intentional at all. I think that one of the difficult things about having something like even if we were to say, okay, we're going to create rites of passage right now, we're going to get off of this podcast, we're going to go out into the world and we're going to start mandating this. Even if we could do that, we live in a culture, in a world today, of just endless complexity and so much relativity, right? The idea that who is anybody going to tell me, about what it means for me to be a man? I get to pick and choose that myself. We so kind of, we become so kind of atomized, that way that, and we're so relativistic that the idea of everybody agreeing on certain traits, that we can all agree upon, it's almost impossible in this day and age, especially in a culture like American culture. And so that is why a lot of people who do buy into hypermasculinity and more traditional masculine norms, that's why they love holding on to this, because they can say, look, we've got this thing. We've got this script that we can hand down to boys and men. And it's a really simple thing you've got to follow. And if you follow this, you will have your man card stamped. If you follow this, having these kinds of entrenched scripts and codes work much better when all these rites of passage and this idea has been completely relativized. I don't even know if that's even a word, but it sounds like it should be.
Should be, yeah.
As a culture that is so relativized, it's just that we've lost that, and so a lot of people can say, "But look, we've got this, and if boys follow this, this is the right path for them." It's always served all of their ancestors. So all their male ancestors. Why should now be any different? Well, we know that it doesn't serve them anymore, and for all the reasons we've been talking about, so far. But to have something that people would agree upon, really does serve boys and men, in kind of like a new script or new rites of passage. I think it's plausible, but I think it's difficult in the time and the place that we live in, when people, for instance, talk about what it means to be civil. We've completely lost the idea of civility in this culture. It's literally down to individual people. Nobody can even agree upon what civility even means anymore. And I think that in the absence of a lot of the structures that we had, that's why we see so many people digging in their heels and saying, this form of masculinity we've always known, we need to keep it because there's nothing else in its place. But in terms of, I think it's very plausible to have rites of passage. I think it has to be very intentional. And for me personally, I would want to see, a lot of the kinds of messages and values that we've been talking about so far today, I would want to see those woven in.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest with you, that would be a rites of passage that would look very different than a lot of the ones that exist around the world.
Yeah.
Because so many, if you look at rites of passage around the world, so many of them are about survival, right? Especially in places where it has to be.
Yeah.
But we're lucky enough, that we're not thrust with the idea of having to find our food every day and having to protect everybody, from the neighboring tribe that might come in and try to kill us all and take our land. So, it would, for my money, this idea of rites of passage really should incorporate a lot of these values we've been talking about.
Yeah. And I think there's like an underlying point that you kind of made there too, where, the rite of passage has to also in turn be valued by the society that you're so if as a society we're kind of, bifurcated in all these different polarized ideals and everything like that, then, somebody's rite of passage may not mean anything to anybody else, in which case they may not feel like it has the same value as, somebody else's rite of passage. And then they probably just all kind of fizzle out. So yeah, it would definitely be a difficult undertaking to figure out what like a generally acceptable, like, when we were growing up, it was probably just like turning 16 and getting your license. And then maybe turning 18 and like joking around that you could go to big boy jail or something. Like, I don't know. Like that was probably all we had, but
yeah, right. But no, I mean, it's yeah, you really, I think it's an interesting concept. Clearly rites of passage have existed for multi-millennia because they served the societies,
right.
In a very practical way. And, and we're at a place where, I know a lot of people feel that, this is something, that boys could benefit from, but then you've got to sit down and say, okay, so what does that look like? Because from forget even community to community, from family to family, it's going to look different.
Yeah.
So, I think it's the idea that, you really have to look at, what really in a very practical way, given that we are in such a rapidly changing culture and world, what really is going to serve boys and men? One of the things, for instance, that I really do think, should be part of the rites of passage, should be, to touch on that analogy Nick was using about the iceberg, teaching boys and men to look beneath the waterline at the rest of the iceberg, teaching boys and men to shut the hell up and to just start listening a lot more and to listen in a very thoughtful, active way and to be asking questions. For my money, these are the kinds of things that, along with everything else, this is really core, that really are going to be serving boys and men, in the classroom and then in the workforce and then in their homes with whoever they happen to be in relationships with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another piece of the book that that resonated with me specifically was, when you talked about, it was a young teen boy who was, I think he experienced a lot of depressive symptoms, and he was talking about how he connected with a friend who was a girl. And this was somebody that he felt like he could really connect with.
Yeah.
And like reflecting on my own experience, like I think there were definitely things that I felt like I couldn't go to my guy friends, but I was grateful enough to have a sister who I felt like I could talk about these things with. And I've always thought about, like, what if I had a brother? Like, would that be different? Like, would I not be able to express some of these things that maybe I was able to do so? But I wanted to see if you wanted to share a little bit more about that, because I thought that was really interesting.
I'm glad you brought that up, Nick, because really that was one of the questions that I wanted to ask both of you. This is a pattern. This is a pattern that I experienced with boys that were from high school, all the way up into later middle age. And the pattern was this. As you said, when they had things that where they really kind of needed to get down to like the nitty gritty of their emotional, of their emotions, almost all of them across the board, again, starting in high school, going all the way up through older middle age, would turn to females in their lives. So that may have been a mother. It may have been an aunt. It may have been a sister. It would have been girls who were friends. It would have been girlfriends. When they got older and their friendships, their friendship circle, really really grew much smaller. And the males didn't have the female friendships as much anymore. It meant their wives, or their partners. And so one of the things I would always say is, well, I'd always start out the interview by saying, who do you go to for emotional support? Well, it's easy. I've got like one or two really good guy friends. And I'd say, okay, so tell me, what does that look like? What it always came back to was that they were going to these one or two really close guy friends for motivation, for a pep talk, or for what I call in the book, targeted transparency. And what I mean by that is that they would take they'd be very careful about the certain things they would share, and they would often go to them for solutions or advice. And I'd say, well, what about emotional support? I just told you. These are the people I go to for emotional support. And I'd say, no, I'm sorry, I'm calling you out on this. What you're seeking out is a type of support, yes. But it's more about, it's more about looking for advice, looking for solutions about how to handle things. And again, they would carefully vet, targeted transparency. They would carefully vet the things they would share. They wouldn't say to their, the older men never said to their friends, I've really screwed up my finances. I'm in a horrible place. What they would say is, so what would you do if one of your accounts was running low, or, could you recommend a financial advisor to talk to, or things like that? I'm having problems with the relationship. This particular thing happened. What do you recommend? It wasn't, a matter of, oh my God, my marriage is imploding and I am so depressed. It wasn't those kinds of things. And so what they would do, again, practically 201, is they would turn to females in their lives for that safe space where they could talk about their fears, their sadness, their anxiety, their frustration, their confusion, all the things that they really needed emotional support for. And I was just really curious to ask you guys. So thank you for sharing that, Nick. But, are you guys in a place yet? And if you don't feel comfortable asking that, totally get it. But are you guys in a place yet where you feel that you could turn to each other or to any other men in your lives, and really get this kind of deep emotional support that you've probably have felt more comfortable getting from females?
It's an interesting question, because I'm at a spot where my initial answer is like, absolutely. But I also don't know that a situation has ever come up where like I've gone outside of, so when I was growing up, it was my mom, and I have two brothers. So it was three boys and my mom, and she was fortunate enough to be able to stay home for a good portion of our youth. So she was like that, female emotional stability. Like she really helped ingrain that. I think in all three of us. And now in my adult years, my wife and I, very different like styles of communication, but in a way it's like really allowed us to both learn how to communicate differently and better. So, like my quick answer is like, I don't really have a lot of situations that come up with people that I'm not willing to just address with them. So like,
well, what could you be a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. So like
specific, but what does that mean in terms of your emotional life, Brendan?
So like stresses with work or stresses with, like, for example, if me and my wife have a disagreement, I talk about it with her, and maybe this might be a good like perspective to have on this. I don't feel like I can shed the weight and feel light again unless I've resolved it with the person it happened with. And then outside forces, her and I talk about it a lot. I talk about it with, I probably talk about it with everybody. I probably just don't shut up about it if it's like an outside force. Like, to be honest, I probably have like no shame just like bringing it up with Nick. Like if I really needed some like, career support, because like I'm feeling like, man, it's just really not going where I want it to, and it's kind of got me feeling down. Or I'll bring it up with my mom, or like I'll bring it up with my dad, my brothers. Like I honestly don't know that I have a filter in that sense. And like I said, if it's with a specific person, I'd address it very directly with that person, because I'm not going to feel better about it just by talking to Nick about it personally. Maybe I would. I just don't feel like I would unless it was truly resolved with the individual.
Okay, so let me ask you this, if I may.
Yeah.
And again, it's all about comfort level, whatever you're comfortable with. So it sounded, and I could be completely wrong, but it sounded a lot of what you were talking about are, again, certain kinds of things that you would like some direction on. But is there anybody that you'll go to when you're really scared, or when there's something about that you're feeling a lot of fear about that's unresolved, and you really would like to get it off your chest, or maybe you don't even want to get it off your chest because you don't even feel comfortable sharing it at all? Is there anybody, if you're feeling really sad, that you can go to and that you can really talk about, the sadness, not so much about the things that are causing it, but about the emotions themselves, the feelings? I
would say like the number one would be my wife on that one. Yeah. I'll just like, tell her that like I don't have like an example off the top of my head, but if I was feeling like really sad about something, or like, no, like actually there was like a career moment where I like thought there was going to be this great opportunity. I had and then just like, and to be honest, it was coronavirus happened. Things got shut down. Like, we had kind of mentally excited ourselves about the opportunity of like, having a little more income and it being really stable and like getting on a career track and all that stuff. And it completely got wiped out. Now it's not even an option. They've actually deleted the position. So they're not even going to interview for it anymore. And I was pretty down about that. Like I was really excited, and her and I like really, our conversations are actually pretty good about working through the emotions of like, what was it about that I was feeling so down about, and, feeling validated, but then also not letting that come in the way of me continuing to move forward with, that emotion not being productive, and me trying to find like, okay, well, what are the other opportunities that could potentially come up, and just finding other avenues to continue to move beyond. So yeah, I would say it's 90% of the time it's with her. And if her and I, actually, this is a true, like the other 10%, we will like go to my parents or her parents or somebody else if we're feeling like we've got this thing that's maybe weighing on both of us and we don't feel like we have an answer that we can come to together. We do. And then, I mean, I'm sure there's been certain things that you and I have talked about. I don't really think twice about it, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. Please continue to dig if you're feeling like I'm that's good. So do either of you guys, when it comes to the kind of thing that Brendan was just talking about in terms of like sharing, forget even just not looking for solutions or advice, but just sharing what just happened with this job is really kind of devastating. I was really counting on this. I was really looking forward to it. It was a big break. And I've just got a lot of, sadness around it. I'm really let down and I'm really bummed out about this. Leaning into those kinds of feelings in the conversation. So, do either of you have any males in your lives that you would feel absolutely comfortable saying the same kind of thing that Brendan, you would say to your wife about the sadness, taking the same conversation with a guy? Is that possible, or is that on the table at all for either of you? Yeah, I've done it. I can think of probably 2 moments where I've really done it with my dad, where like it's gotten to the point, again, it's probably like not feeling like, I haven't felt like I've been able to really fully express it, or like there just is another level of like, I would equate it to I'm seeking out the same feeling that you were describing that those men's circles give to one another, where they just feeling affirmed in your feelings. There's definitely been times where I feel like, probably subconsciously even, that the minute I got that from another male, it was kind of a different level of emotional relief, I would say, where like I was like, voicing this to another guy really actually helped me like solidify that I was like feeling this way, but that's okay. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So Nick, is that something you want to address, or would you prefer to pass on that one?
No, I'll address it too. I definitely think there have been times to where I've avoided certain topics with guys and kept them to myself, and maybe save them for talking to a friend who's a girl.
Yeah.
And I think it comes out of, I think there is like this inability to kind of really listen and reflect, and just like sit with the person that you're talking about that is very associated with like masculinity. And I think that is maybe what prevents a lot of opening up, because you don't want the solution focused response in that moment. And that might be what you're anticipating. I think that at times that's what I'm like, okay, I know that I'm going to get an answer to something, but maybe I already know the answer and I don't want to hear that right now, you know? And I think the other piece of it too, it's just that piece of not feeling like a burden. You don't want to like
Right.
this person probably has their own problems. So why do I need to put my problems on them? And yeah, I feel like I've definitely found at times that, like the women that I've experienced in my life have been more receptive to some of those things. But I've definitely been fortunate and grateful for having, other male figures in my life who have been open to those moments. But it does feel more challenging to go to that length. Definitely.
It does. You're right. Thank you so much for sharing that, Nick. It's right. There's the feeling of being judged, being rejected. And yet it's funny because so many guys, and this is more true of guys like some guys in college and guys who are a little bit older would say, I don't want to burden them. I don't want to burden, these other guys, I don't want to burden. And I'd say, well, but you're okay to burden some of the females in your lives. I think we say that, and a lot of guys do believe on a very deep level that they don't want to burden, right? But the thing of it is, I really do think that is an excuse. I think it's a very acceptable excuse amongst guys. I don't want to burden them with it.
Right.
Really, the reality is that if they had a guy friend who they know would respond the way that a girl who's a friend or a girlfriend would respond, I think they'd feel a lot more comfortable doing it. Because a lot of guys, that's the very safe answers. I don't want to burden everybody with it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. But okay, well then don't burden the females in your lives with it either. Mm-hmm. And the thing of it is that a lot of guys fear rejection. They fear being judged. They fear, that, and this is a form of rejection that guys won't want to talk about it. And there's truth to a lot of that. Because a lot of guys will try to change the subject, or will say, look, man, this isn't something I can really help you with. Or they may even get sometimes laughed at, or there will be forms of rejection and judgment. And so, but the truth of it is, when we say things like that, and a lot of guys say this, I don't want to burden them with it. It really is. I really do believe, based on all the research I've been doing, I just personally believe that it's an excuse. Mm-hmm. Because again, if you're going to say I don't want to burden them, why would you say it's okay to then burden the females? And a lot of times guys will say, well, because like what you were saying, Nick, they're okay with it. They want to hear it. Well, then if you really look back at the real reasons why you don't want to burden them, it's because they don't want to hear it. You're afraid of what their reaction is going to be, or that they don't want to hear it. Either way, what that really speaks to is that an awareness that you can't go to guys for this kind of support. Whether you're afraid of it or whether they don't want to hear it, that you can't go to them. They don't have your back when it comes to emotional support. But that you can go to the females. So it's really not so much about the burden. It's the fear of how it's going to be received. And that it's going to be not, and that, it's just, there's all those things, how it's going to be received ultimately.
Yeah. Even just having this conversation, like I think back on like some of the moments where I probably could have been like probably more down, or like, could have had a more severe, I feel like, and I genuinely believe this, and like, maybe this is, I don't want to be like too naive to think that, like, no, that's okay.
I'm sorry. The lighting is horrible.
No,
Sorry
that's okay. we still got like a good sun line right across your shoulder. So we're picking you up good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right.
But like, I truly believe, and I don't know where this comes from. I just feel like I'm like emotionally resilient, like as good as they come. Like, and I can't explain it. It may like I've been called like the eternal optimist. And of course I do have moments and I do like address those, but like, man, it is very hard to make me feel like down, doubt myself, not feel like everything's going to be okay. I can't explain it because I've been the guy friend. I actually have a few memories where I specifically, and I won't name the person, so I'll give details if you want, but I've been the guy friend and I've been like, dude, tell me about that. And I've really pushed them to give, like, one of my guy friends, I was talking to him and he was having like a real relationship issue where like he thought it was over and he didn't think it was going to continue. And I really pushed him, and like he ended up spending his entire lunch break to talk to and like telling me, because I was thinking to myself, like, man, like he's not going to talk to anybody. I know this friend, he is not going to talk to anybody about this. So if I don't talk to him now, these are going to be like boiled up emotions inside. He's never going to address it. So I've been the person who's pushed back on my guy friends actually to like make sure that they feel like, dude, no shame, no judgment. You can't just hold that in. Like, and sometimes it's funny. I take some of my guy friends, I'll be like, dude, that's stupid. Why are you holding that in? Like, that's not good for you. And like, I'll kind of push them back the other way of like, against like the norm is not the norm. Like, why would you not just share it with me? Like, that's so silly. Right. So yeah, it's interesting. And I don't know where that comes from. The like,
I don't know, but I can tell you that, I have a really good guy friend, right now, probably my closest guy friend, who I can sit there and just, and he's happy to listen. He's a therapist. And, I can share with him, some of the struggles I'm dealing with, some of the strong feelings. And yet he can sit there and listen all day and just be like, really kind of unjudgmental, just quietly listening and acknowledging and maybe even being a little bit supportive of the emotional struggles, but he'll never share his own stuff. He'll never share his own stuff with me. And yet he knows if there's anybody who's going to sit there and, respond in kind to him, it's going to be me.
Yeah.
And so I think for a lot of guys, it's easier, it's easier to be that person that other guys can come to and talk to, and that they can create that safe space. But it's not always easy, for some of us to find it ourselves, or to feel comfortable, like my friend, to feel comfortable and trusting enough to say that I'm going to make myself vulnerable in front of you. It's something that and he's just a great example. He's a really sensitive, sweet guy, but if he does talk at all, it's probably to the women in his, that he's friends with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm gonna have to wrap it up soon, guys.
Yeah. No worries.
No, this has been great. Thank you so much.
It's been a really fun conversation.
Yeah.
Really appreciate the interest and the curiosity very much.
Absolutely.
And sharing the stories. Thank you so much for being willing to make it a conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you for taking this time and sharing all this with us. Cause it was so cool to hear about like all the different places that you went in creating this book and all the different like experiences that you had with these different people. So having you verbalize all this experience has been really great to hear. And
good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's been a good time for myself, and Brennan can probably agree that like a good time for reflection in our own lives about this. So
it's where growth happens, in the self-reflection.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, it's something that, as you guys know, life is completely dynamic, especially, these days. And I mean, we're all in that place, it's always good to have that kind of reflection. So,
yeah.
So thank you for the conversation, you guys.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.